Hello and welcome. This is Chala Dincoy, CEO and founder of The Repositioning Expert. I am here with another amazing, exciting, crazy, and this one's a really good one, episode of my podcast, Naked Marketing. I have here today my guest, Corey Axelrod, and Bryce, his interpreter. Corey, welcome.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm really excited to have a wonderful conversation with you today.
Now, this is a first for me. Is this a first for you, being on a podcast? I bet not.
It's been a while since I've been on a podcast. I want to say the last time was a few years, but this is not new. But again, I'm excited to be here with you, and I'm looking forward to what our conversation unfolds.
I love it. So tell everyone what you do for a living and who you help.
Great question. So my company, To Extend, is a deaf-owned strategic consulting firm that works with organizations in a variety of different industries, such as healthcare, healthcare education, K-12 education, and higher ed. And what we focus on is helping them and strategize different elements and how to improve the deaf and hard of hearing user experience. That could be organizational redesigning, compliance. We also consult on deaf awareness and the deaf culture. We work in a variety of different industries. It's not only the ones that I've mentioned, but manufacturing, retail. So there's a wide spectrum. And at the end of the day, we want to focus on deaf and hard of hearing consumers, making sure that these companies tailor and meet the needs and expectations of the deaf and hard of hearing community.
I love that you include hard of hearing. Huge. Okay. So how big is this population?
Again, great question. If you look at the broad community, there's 48 million deaf and hard of hearing individuals. But keep in mind, when you start to break down the specifics, there's an estimated to 1 to 1.5 million that are culturally deaf. They consider themselves members of the signing and the deaf community. They use American Sign Language. They have shared values, beliefs, and norms within the community. And then the whole array of the spectrum, like I mentioned, is broad. You have individuals on the other side that would consider themselves that they've lost their hearing. They don't consider themselves to be part of the culturally deaf community. It could be age-related hearing loss. There could be other contributing factors where they've lost their hearing. So there's this huge gamut. And I want to mention that my company really focuses on the entire gamut, not just the culturally deaf population. We really want to help organizations meet the needs of every single person that falls within that spectrum. I consider myself culturally deaf. I'm fourth generation deaf within my family. American Sign Language, ASL, is my first and preferred language. And I've learned American Sign Language with the scaffolding approach on how I was able to acquire English and literacy skills, and so becoming bilingual. I also use hearing aids, and I do speak for myself as well, but I'm most comfortable using American Sign Language. ASL, like I mentioned, is my first and preferred language. I feel the most comfortable within that realm. I never feel ostracized, or I feel excluded or isolated, even marginalized. I feel at home within that cultural and linguistic minority.
This is so fascinating to me. It's almost like I have a nudist friend. I'm not saying you're a nudist, but they call people who wear closed textiles. And now I'm learning about culturally deaf. So does culturally deaf mean you are not actually deaf, but you are sympathetic to them and therefore you learn the language to support them and to be part of their community? Is that what it means? Well, I never even heard of that.
It's interesting because many people will label me as hard of hearing because I do have residual hearing and I do speak for myself from time to time. But in today's climate, day and age, it's really important to give people the space and the opportunity to self-discover, self-identify. The labels that are put onto me, they go beyond my hearing level. It's where do I feel most comfortable? That's within the deaf community, the culturally deaf community. I don't feel isolated. I don't feel marginalized. We have a shared language. We have a shared language, beliefs, culture, and norms, and I feel whole. My wife is deaf. So even though we both can use our voice, we use sign language at home. It's just an innate instinct that fully takes over, and it's where you feel like you connect and belong. I have hearing family members who use spoken English and I converse with them, but again, I feel most comfortable using American Sign Language. And the reason being, I'd like to share an example. For example, within the family that they're all hearing and using spoken English, I have to work extra hard to make sure that I'm able to grasp everything. I have to rely on my residual hearing, and hearing aids and technology don't always cooperate. And so using American Sign Language, I don't have to work so hard. It's 100% visually accessible. I'm not worried about, am I missing something or am I interpreting the information? So that's what I mean about being culturally deaf.
Totally makes sense. Um, okay, so let's talk about how big a problem is, um, you know, serving the deaf community in the business world.
Again, I love these questions, and I think it is a challenge if you don't engage. If you're refusing to engage with the deaf community, I think that's where problems pop up. Many different organizations and companies struggle with the how and where to start. And that's where my company, I think, can come in, provide the know-how and the expertise to position companies to effectively support the needs of the deaf and hard of hearing individuals within that community. There's a variety of different ways to engage. I think about it in a twofold approach. One, internal, like with employees, and then two, potential customers. In regards to employees, how do we make employees that the organization is as diverse and inclusive and has multiple different perspectives? That also includes people that are deaf, hard of hearing, or have lost their hearing. That could be product development, service development, figuring out that it's not a one size fits all. Maybe also figuring out how to develop policies and procedures for the employee experience. You also have to think about consumers or clients or customers, the buying experience from them, that journey, that sales experience. Is that process, that journey, is that accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing community? Something as simple as making sure that all promotional material is accessible. I think about products, making sure that products are accessible to the deaf and hard of hearing individuals. For example, there's many products that have a lot of audio input and output. The deaf and hard of hearing community misses out on that. Are we making sure that technology is visible? Do we have some sort of visual cues, for example, alarms, like on a microwave or an oven, a doorbell? How can we make things more visibly accessible instead of depending on that audiological world that we navigate in? So when we're looking at marketing, part of that process, it's really to investigate and incorporate multiple different perspectives to enhance the product and the overall experience.
So this brings me, I'm so glad you talked about marketing. Of course, I'm in marketing, so I want to know the biggest marketing mistake that you ever made in your company.
Hmm. Uh, so my background, I mentioned, I have an MBA in marketing and sales management. So I appreciate the conversation about marketing for sure. And I've worked with mentors, business coaches, really help me align my journey strategically. So my business coach has always gently nudged me and said, remember your target audience, your target market. Sometimes I jump ahead without investigating. Sometimes I'll run before I walk. And sometimes I think I know. And so I make those assumptions. And sometimes I'll make an email or I'll contact and I'm not speaking their language, quote unquote. So for me, it really takes me time, or I need to take the time to practice what I preach, take an inhale and exhale. I realize that I'm working with hearing individuals, that I'm working with the deaf and hard of hearing community, understanding that marketing. So the same applies to me where I really need to make sure that the services that are offered, that we're directly speaking to the potential customer. Our message resonates 100% with them. So I think with that being said, it's an ongoing process. I've made some mistakes, of course, where I've spent a lot of time and energy on outbound marketing, campaigning, and it didn't resonate. And I'm wondering, what happened to hit that brick wall? So it's a missed opportunity, um, expend expending a lot of time and energy and money. If we did it right from the beginning, I think the outcomes would be different. So I wanted to share that.
That's great. So not speaking your target's language had a very low ROI for your outbound outreach. Is that what happened? That's great.
Exactly. Exactly.
So what I do for a living is I help people figure out their niche and their message according to that niche. And the pain is always what determines the message, because 70% of human beings purchase based on pain. So how did you, I mean, I love that you have an MBA in this and you had a lot of mentors. So how did you figure out the right language for your target?
Another great question. I think at the end of the day, it goes back to connecting with individuals within your audience, your target audience, specifically having conversations to understand their pain points and how my messages can address their pain points as well. So we have solutions that address their pain points and providing options. A lot of marketing, you really need to evoke emotion, and I think that's where my mistakes came in. Like I mentioned, we were using messaging and outbounding it, for example, to healthcare organizations, and it didn't connect with them. It didn't evoke the response that we wanted from a healthcare professional. However, it evoked a stronger response from the deaf community, but that's not our target audience.
Yeah.
We need to work with the other audience to make sure that progress is being made. And so how do we break through potential barriers? So at the end of the day, it's really understanding the language that they use, that making sure that our message gets through to those individuals that are within our target market.
That's amazing advice. So what parting advice do you have for all the viewers and listeners?
You don't know what you don't know. And the sooner we accept that and understand that, the sooner we can make more progress. So I think it's so critical that we become more diverse in our thinking, including individuals with a variety of different reputations or identities or what they represent. As we continue to service our customers, as we continue to spread our message, increase our sales, how do we incorporate all those different elements? The more well off or the better off we will be. So I think sometimes we need to backtrack and go back to the drawing board and embrace different perspectives. I think that's what I'm trying to practice on a daily basis, because I think it's really important. Again, I don't know everything. I wish I did, but I don't. And so I think being aware of that, being cognizant of that is so important for any business professional.
Thank you so much. So how can people reach you, Corey?
There are several different ways, but email is probably the best option. So my email address is Corey, Corey, at to ascend to the number AXEND.com. Again, that's Corey at toexcend.com. And the email is my preferred method. Website is www.toexcend.com. That's the number 2, AXEND. And you can contact request through that website. I have a request form there.
Plus, we're going to have all your links, and we are going to be sharing on your social media, and we'll be sharing on our social media and emails. So thank you so much, both of you, for being here. All the best.
Thank you so much again for this wonderful opportunity to connect with you, to share my message. I really appreciate the conversation, and it really means a lot. It's really about increasing awareness and having those continued honest conversations. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Well, this has increased my awareness, I'll tell you that.
Awesome.